To master crafting legacies for champions meets, we have to solve a fundamental problem. How do we actually value each white spark and its associated skill? Today is our foundation, a high-level overview of skill categories and archetypes within them, all graded through a CM-focused lens. This sets the stage for our next two videos, evaluating individual activation conditions, and finally, the step-by-step process of crafting your legacies. We'll get started with a quick high-level overview of the 5 main categories of skills. First, green skills. These provide flat stat increases when specific track, race, or environmental conditions are met. The increase allows your stats to break past the cap. Blue skills restore exhausted HP as a percentage, meaning they become particularly efficient as your total HP pool increases. Red skills apply debuffs and as such should only really be bought on a dedicated support Uma. These target skill-specific enemy Umas to reduce velocity, acceleration, HP, or field of view, or intensify the effects of rushed. Yellow skills are by far the most complicated and usually the most important. These are the skills that turn a well-statted Uma into a consistent round 1 winner. They increase velocity, acceleration, lane movement speed, start reaction speed, or field of view. What makes them complicated isn't the effect themselves, but rather when these effects trigger and will be useful. Often the goal is to match the activation conditions to the track or even manipulate those conditions through CM team composition. Finally, there are purple skills. These aren't a true category, but rather negative versions of green, blue, and yellow skills that are only available by event. An interesting note of purple skills is that most let you spend skill points to remove it, but then also let you buy into the positive version, thereby treating the purple as an expensive hint. Within all skill categories, there are hybrids that can secondarily mimic other effects from the same category, or even across categories. To accurately value a skill, we need to understand the objective of the skill. We'll start by analyzing what makes a skill good in team trials, where the goal is maximizing point score through clearly defined triggers. Then we'll contrast that with champions meetings, where the only metric that matters is one Uma crossing the finish line first. Understanding this shift in priority is key to avoid trap skills that look good on paper but are suboptimal for reaching the win condition. In team trials, your total score per Uma per heat is driven by 3 primary sources. First is race performance, which tracks metrics like placement and finish time. Second, and most critical for skill build strategy, is skill activations. You are rewarded for the sheer quantity and rarity of skills triggered, regardless of their strategic impact. Finally, there is the opponent rating bonus, a multiplier based on your opponent's rating strength. The higher your Uma's rating, the higher the competition is rated, and the higher your score ceiling. Race performance is largely driven by raw stats rather than specific skills, since there are multiple tracks for any one distance. To maximize your score from skill activations, you want the highest volume of highest rarity possible, since a gold skill is worth 2.4 times more points than a white skill, but generally only costs twice as much. The skill also needs to be activated to be scored, so this means prioritizing skills with easy or guaranteed activation conditions and training wit where performance allows. For most efficiently spending skill points to increase rating, it's best spent on heavily discounted skills and gold skills. In this environment, the actual effect of a skill is secondary to its rarity and activation rate. Champions meetings invert this logic entirely. There is no scoring, only the win matters. Skill rarity is irrelevant. We only care about the impact of an effect and its strategic timing. In fact, some difficult activation condition abilities that shouldn't be considered for team trials are optimal for CMs. In a competitive heat, a skill that triggers 100% of the time, but barely shifts your finish time, is inferior to a high-impact win condition skill that may only trigger 10% of the time. For CM aces, the emphasis on gold changes as the combined effects of multiple white skills often outperform a single gold skill for the same cost. There are exceptions, such as gold recoveries, due to their raw efficiency over their white counterparts. There are skills that excel in both formats due to their race performance effects, scaling well with their rarity, such as Professor of Curvature and Taking the Lead. CM success requires a shift in mindset. Stop chasing inflated ratings and target performance peaks that actually secure a win. Once your build has a potential to win, your next goal is to maximize how reliably it can reach that potential. Now that we've established how CM skill choice objectives differ from team trials, we're going to rank the various skill archetypes within our 5 categories. These tier lists will be generally based around 4 key metrics: the strength of the effect, activation difficulty, activation timing, and base skill point cost. Keep in mind that we aren't diving into individual skills or specific activation conditions just yet. Today we're only building the conceptual framework, and we'll bridge that skill evaluation gap in the next video. Green skills offer the highest performance value per skill point because they are so restrictive. For a champions meeting, a green skill is binary. If it doesn't align perfectly with the specific track and starting conditions, it is a complete waste of skill points with zero effect from them. The value of these skills follow the same rules that the underlying stats do. First, there is generally a clear hierarchy of stat importance with speed at the top. Second, stats have diminishing returns, meaning a green skill is most impactful when it shores up a stat that is most below its target. This applies most notably for stamina. Once survivability is met, extra stamina will have zero value beyond serving as a skill proc. Most green skills provide plus 40 to a stat at the first single circle level and an additional plus 20 for the second double circle level at a 20% higher base cost. Conversely, purple skills apply a negative 40 penalty and should be weighed as a single circle if they match activation conditions. The CM guaranteed conditions, like season or weather, are the most valuable because they always activate. In contrast, skills that rely on race-specific factors like favorite position are generally weak due to their unpredictable activation. You should only really reach for these inconsistent skills if you need an extra proc for groundwork or if you need to raise an Uma's high roll to give them a possibility of winning. Essentially, if it isn't guaranteed, you're gambling, so make sure the payout justifies the risk. When evaluating blue skills, the most important distinctions are how likely the skill is to meet activation conditions and where it can activate. In the next video, we'll go over exactly how to analyze the activation conditions and only use rough percentages for now. Almost all non-unique blue skills follow the same recovery values, 5.5% of HP for golds and 1.5% for whites. Unique blue skills are more potent. They are guaranteed to trigger if conditions are met and typically restore 5.5% along with secondary utility. Inherited versions of these uniques, however, generally drop in efficiency to the level of a standard white recovery or in between a white and a gold. Since recoveries are percentage-based, they scale directly with max HP, which is primarily determined by stamina. They also gain efficiency as guts increases, which lowers your HP consumption rate, though stamina remains the primary factor. Timing is everything for recovery, governed by 2 critical rules. First, you cannot overheal above your starting maximum HP. Well, the November 11th patch mitigated this by shifting early race triggers to be the second half of the opening leg, or extended the activation window into the mid-race. Wasted potential HP is still a risk. Second, your HP at the start of the late race determines your spurt. A recovery that triggers too late might cause a delayed spurt or prevent it entirely. This makes mid-race recoveries the gold standard for efficiently securing an on-time, full-length spurt. Just remember, a suboptimal recovery that activates is always better than an optimal one that doesn't. When evaluating red skills, the most important distinction is whether the effect requires field of view. This restriction significantly lowers consistency. The best red skills are non-vision requiring speed debuffs. They have reliable impact with no vision restriction, and velocity reduction will always be directly helpful. Stamina debuffs are also high tier, typically draining 1% of HP as a white and 3% as a gold. They have the highest potential impact because Umas that run out of HP cannot spurt effectively, and in CM, that is a guaranteed loss. However, with the introduction of Rico and Unity Cup, stamina has become more accessible, meaning most aces are built to withstand some degree of HP pressure. On the other hand, anti-acceleration skills, despite targeting the most valuable mechanic in the game, are often weak in practice due to overly restrictive activation conditions. Similarly, rushed intensifiers are too inconsistent to rely on. They require your opponent to trigger a rushed state first, which is entirely out of your control. Finally, field of view debuffs are effectively useless and should be avoided entirely in your builds. While acceleration is the most impactful mechanic in the game, these skills aren't automatic pickups. Their value is entirely dependent on timing, specifically where they trigger based on race phase, rank position, topography, and track shape. We'll analyze with more specificity in the next video. For now, we'll just use general location archetypes. Early race accelerations are mandatory for frontrunners to establish their lead. For other styles, these are suboptimal because they will most likely just trigger pace down mode. This occurs during position keep, roughly the first half of the race. If a further back style gets too close to Umas in the next style, they will slow down once the buff is over to return to their style's position. The only niche exception for early excels on other styles is for pace chasers in environments without fronts where you're fighting to hopefully become the pacemaker. Unique skills are extremely effective if their activation conditions align with the track. They are so powerful they can justify completely fixing an Uma's affinities just to be able to run them. Similarly, fixed location excels, relying on hills or finals, corners, or straights, are top tier when they line up with the start of the late race. If you lack fixed options, anywhere excels can be a viable gamble if one of the activation windows overlaps with an acceleration period. Conversely, mid-race acceleration has almost zero value since you are already at target speed. There is an exception if the mid-race boost lasts long enough to reach significantly into the late race. This is known as acceleration carryover, and it is one of the most potent win conditions in the game. Velocity increases are the counterpart to acceleration. They are also entirely dependent on timing, but with an inverted goal. They want to trigger outside any acceleration period. While they have a lower performance ceiling than a similarly well-timed acceleration, they are far safer and more consistent because a much larger portion of the track is effective for them. To understand why, we have to look at the mechanics. Most velocity buffs don't directly increase your Uma's current speed, instead they raise her target speed. If a velocity buff triggers while your Uma is accelerating, it is largely wasted because she hasn't even reached her original target speed yet. Relatedly and similarly to acceleration, velocity buffs have the potential for enhanced effectiveness with speed carryover. If a buff triggers in the mid-race and lasts until the late race, your Uma will be entering at an elevated current speed. By minimizing the gap to her late race top speed, she spends less time accelerating and reaches her target speed faster. Finally, just like acceleration, early race velocity is vital for frontrunners to expand their lead, while other styles should generally avoid it to prevent wasting it with pace down mode. Other yellow archetypes are more niche. Start reaction speed is a must-have for frontrunners who need the lead but are a lower priority for other styles. Lane movement speed is highly variable and difficult to evaluate. It's generally weak unless paired with a powerful secondary effect like acceleration. I recommend beginners generally avoid these until they understand specific track mechanics, because despite the high level potential if utilized correctly, they are often suboptimally spent skill points. Finally, field of view increases are completely wasted on any ace and only have minor potential for support, but even then, your skill points are almost always better spent elsewhere. Establishing these core valuation principles is a necessary step for making individual skill evaluation easier to digest. I know today was more conceptual in general, but this framework is a foundation for moving beyond strictly relying on tools like the Umalator. I promise our next video will be much more directly actionable, teaching you how to evaluate specific activation conditions with a high level of proficiency. I hope this serves as a solid foundation for your future builds. Remember to build with what you have, not what others do.